The pre-dawn light crept slowly across the California coastline, painting the sky in muted shades of gray and pale blue. The Naval Special Warfare Training Center in Coronado stood as a monument to human endurance, a crucible where ordinary men were forged into extraordinary warriors. And in this temple of military precision, Marcus Thompson moved like a ghost, invisible, yet somehow more substantial than the world around him. His weathered hands gripped the industrial mop with a muscle memory that spoke of decades of discipline. Each movement was calculated, precise, a dance of cleaning that most would consider mundane. But to Marcus, it was a meditation. The floor beneath his feet had seen countless stories of triumph and sacrifice, and he knew every inch of its history. At 52, Marcus carried the weight of 1,000 untold stories. His body was a map of experiences a slight limp from an old injury, hands calloused not just from cleaning, but from years of handling weapons with surgical precision. The janitor's uniform hung loose on his frame, carefully concealing a physique that still carried the marks of extraordinary training. Most who saw him dismissed Marcus without a second glance. Another aging maintenance worker, another background figure in the world of military excellence. But those who knew how to look, those who understood the language of experience, etched into skin and muscle, would have seen something entirely different. His eyes, a steel gray that could cut through the most elaborate deception, scanned the facility with an awareness that betrayed years of operational training. Each movement was deliberate, each glance a calculation. The mop in his hands could have been a precision rifle, the cleaning cart a tactical vehicle. Marcus moved with the same methodical approach he had once applied in the most dangerous corners of the world. The early morning was his favorite time. Before the SEALs began their training, before the facility erupted with the sounds of physical challenges and military discipline, there was a moment of absolute silence. Marcus used these moments to remember, to reflect on a past that few would ever comprehend. Photographs were a luxury he couldn't afford. Memories were dangerous things, capable of breaking the careful facade he had constructed. But they lived inside him, as real as the floor he cleaned, as tangible as the breath in his lungs. Missions that had no official record, operations that existed only in the whispers of those who had been there, moments that defined humanity in its most raw and unfiltered state. The cleaning cart moved with him, a faithful companion through years of silent service. To the casual observer, it was just another piece of maintenance equipment. To Marcus, it was a shield, a way to move through a world that would never truly understand the depth of his past. A group of young SEALs entered the facility, their youth and energy a stark contrast to Marcus's measured movements. They laughed, pushed each other, talked about missions and training with the unbridled enthusiasm of those who believed they were invincible. Marcus had been like them once long ago, in a time that seemed more like a dream than a memory. He remembered his first mission, the weight of responsibility, the clarity of purpose that came with understanding that lives depended on split-second decisions. Those memories were both a burden and a badge of honor, something he carried silently, never seeking recognition, never wanting to relive the moments that had defined him. The facility began to come alive. Sounds of preparation, the rhythmic movements of training, the controlled chaos of military preparation. Marcus continued his work, becoming part of the background, yet more aware than anyone else of the potential and the pain that lived within these walls. A young officer walked past, barely acknowledging Marcus's presence. But Marcus caught the slight tension in the man's walk, the way his hand unconsciously moved to a phantom weapon. He recognized a fellow traveler, someone who had seen things that couldn't be unseen, someone carrying stories that would never be told. Their eyes met for a brief moment, a flash of recognition, a silent understanding that passed between them faster than a heartbeat. The officer continued walking, but Marcus knew. He had been seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. The Mop continued its rhythmic dance across the floor. Clean, precise, methodical. Each stroke was a memory, each movement a testament to a life lived in the shadows. Marcus Thompson was more than a janitor. He was a keeper of secrets, a guardian of untold stories, a warrior who had chosen silence over recognition. As the facility fully awakened, preparing for another day of pushing human limits, Marcus remained exactly where he had always been, everywhere and nowhere, seeing everything, remembered by no one. The floor gleamed, a perfect reflection of the world around it. And Marcus continued his work, a silent sentinel in a world of noise and ambition. The break room was a microcosm of military culture, space where bravado and brotherhood collided in a symphony of testosterone and unspoken stories. Stainless steel tables reflected the harsh fluorescent lighting, creating a sterile environment that felt more like an interrogation room than a place of respite. Commander Jack Reynolds dominated the space, his presence as large as his 6'2" frame. A veteran of multiple deployments, with arms that told stories of countless hours in the gym and combat zones. He was the epitome of what a Navy SEAL represented. Metal ribbons cascaded down his chest like a waterfall of achievement, each one a testament to missions that would never be fully disclosed to the public. "Listen up," Jack boomed, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from years of leading men in the most challenging environments imaginable. A group of younger SEALs hung on his every word, their eyes wide with a mixture of admiration and anticipation. Marcus Thompson moved between the tables, his cleaning cart a familiar companion. To the untrained eye, he was just another maintenance worker, invisible and inconsequential. But those who understood the language of observation knew better. His ears were attuned to every conversation, every subtle nuance of military dialogue. "You think shooting is just about pulling a trigger?" Jack challenged his audience. "It's about becoming one with the weapon. It's about understanding that the space between you and the target is more than just distance. It's a conversation." The young SEALs leaned in closer. Rodriguez, a recent addition to the team, couldn't contain his enthusiasm. "Tell us about your most difficult shot, Commander," he urged, his voice a mixture of hero worship and genuine curiosity. Jack's eyes grew distant, a technique Marcus recognized instantly. It was the look of a storyteller preparing to carefully curate a narrative revealing just enough to inspire, but never too much to compromise operational security. "Afghanistan, 2011, Jack began. Hindu Kush Mountains. Temperature was dropping to -20. We're talking about a target nearly 2 kilometers out, wind cutting like a knife, visibility close to zero." Marcus paused his cleaning, his hand resting almost imperceptibly on a cloth. He knew this story. Not Jack's version, but the real version, the one that would never be told in this break room. The young SEALs were captivated. Rodriguez leaned so far forward, he was practically falling off his chair. "What happened?" he whispered, as if speaking too loudly might break the spell of the story. Jack's laugh was sharp, almost cutting. "I made a shot that supposedly was impossible. Took out a high-value target with a single round, through conditions that would make most marksmen laugh and walk away." Marcus continued his work, but his movements had changed, subtly, almost imperceptibly. To the untrained eye, he was still just cleaning. But his ears were laser-focused, his body a coiled spring of memories. The conversation continued, a testosterone-fueled dance of military achievements and near-impossible feats. Each SEAL tried to outdo the last, stories growing more elaborate with each retelling. Jack remained the centerpiece, his confidence a tangible force that filled the room. "Only SEALs shoot that clean," Jack proclaimed, raising his coffee mug like a trophy. "We're not just soldiers. We're precision instruments, walking weapon systems." The irony was not lost on Marcus. walking weapon systems. If they only knew. Rodriguez, eager to prove himself, launched into his own story. A recent training exercise, a challenging shot that had impressed his instructors. His enthusiasm was infectious, his youth a stark contrast to the weathered veterans around him. Marcus remembered being that young once. The belief that you were invincible, that the world was a challenge to be conquered rather than a complex tapestry of human experiences. He had learned differently, the hard way. As the stories continued, Marcus completed his cleaning. Each movement was deliberate, each motion a testament to a discipline that ran deeper than any military training. The SEALs continued their banter, completely unaware of the true warrior moving silently among them. Jack's final proclamation hung in the air. "No one shoots like a SEAL," he declared, his fingers tracing the outline of his multiple marksmanship awards. A statement of absolute certainty. Marcus allowed himself the briefest of smiles. Absolute certainty, he knew, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The break room gradually emptied. Jack and his team moved on to their next training evolution, their voices echoing with the confidence of warriors who believed they were the best of the best. Marcus remained behind, finishing his cleaning. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. But something had shifted, a subtle tension, a barely perceptible electricity that suggested something extraordinary was about to unfold. The day was young, and Marcus Thompson was far from finished. The Thursday morning air crackled with anticipation. The Naval Special Warfare Training Center transformed into a cathedral of military precision, where every movement was calculated, every breath a potential game-changer. Advanced sniper qualifications were more than just a test. They were a crucible that separated the exceptional from the merely competent. Commander Jack Reynolds orchestrated the morning like a conductor, preparing for a complex symphony. The shooting range was his stage, the rifles his instruments, the targets his most unforgiving critics. Overhead, marine layer clouds hung low, creating a natural challenge that would test even the most skilled marksman. "Listen up," Jack's voice cut through the morning mist like a razor. "Today isn't about just hitting targets. Today is about perfection." The assembled SEALs stood in near military stillness. Rodriguez, the young operative from the break room, gripped his rifle with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Around him, seasoned operators moved with the fluid grace of predators, their eyes already calculating wind patterns, distance, and environmental variables. The range was a technological marvel. Advanced tracking systems, wind measurement devices, and computer-assisted target acquisition created an environment that simulated the most extreme combat conditions imaginable. Targets would appear and disappear, move at unpredictable speeds, and challenge every fundamental principle of long-distance marksmanship. Jack walked the line, his critical eye assessing each shooter. "We're looking at scenarios that push beyond standard military training," he explained. "These aren't static targets. These are living, breathing challenges that will test every single skill you've developed." The first series of targets appeared distant silhouettes emerging from artificial fog, moving at varying speeds and trajectories. The sound of precision. Rifles filled the air, a staccato rhythm of controlled explosions and mechanical precision. Rodriguez took his first shot. Clean hit, but not perfect. A slight deviation that would have been acceptable in standard training, but fell short of the day's demanding standards. Not good enough. Jack's critique was immediate. In the field, that almost could mean the difference between mission success and total failure. Marcus Thompson continued his cleaning nearby, his movements seemingly random but calculated. To the untrained eye, he was just another maintenance worker. But those who understood true observation would have noticed how his eyes tracked every movement, how his body subtly responded to each shot fired. The challenges escalated. Targets now simulated moving vehicles, human targets at extreme distances. Scenarios that required split-second decision-making and absolute precision. Wind machines created unpredictable conditions, testing not just shooting skills, but the shooter's ability to adapt instantaneously. Jack demonstrated, his rifle an extension of his body. A shot that seemed impossible, a target moving at 60 kilometers per hour, partially obscured, at a distance that would make most marksmen laugh and walk away. His bullet found its mark with surgical precision. This, Jack proclaimed, is what separates SEALs from every other military unit. This is why we're the best. The young SEALs looked on in awe. Rodriguez tried to replicate the shot, his determination burning bright. But precision wasn't about determination. It was about something deeper, something that couldn't be taught in training rooms or explained in briefings. As the morning progressed, the challenges became increasingly complex. Multiple moving targets, scenarios that required shooting through simulated obstacles, environmental conditions that pushed human perception to its absolute limits. Marcus continued his work, his cleaning cart moving with a rhythm that seemed almost synchronized with the gunfire. To those paying attention, which was no one, his movements were too precise, too calculated to be purely coincidental. The final challenge of the morning was a true test of human capability. A series of targets would appear in rapid succession, at varying distances, with minimal exposure time. Success required more than skill. It required something almost supernatural. Jack's team went first. Good shots, impressive shots, but not perfect, not impossible. As the morning session drew to a close, the mood was a mixture of exhaustion and competitive energy. Jack gathered his team, preparing to break down their performance, to critique and improve. We're close to perfection, he told them. But close isn't good enough. Marcus finished cleaning the area around the shooting range. His cart moved smoothly, his movements unremarkable. But something had changed. A subtle electricity hung in the air, a promise of something extraordinary about to unfold. The day was far from over, and Marcus Thompson was just getting started. As the SEALs began to disperse, none of them noticed the janitor's hands that moved with a muscle memory far beyond simple cleaning, hands that had once done far more than push a mop across a floor. The stage was set, the players were in position, and the true performance was about to begin. Time seemed to pause in that singular moment. The shooting range, a cathedral of military precision, held its breath. It happened during the briefest of lulls, those precious minutes between training evolutions when equipment was being reset, when soldiers caught their breath and prepared for the next challenge. Most would have overlooked the opportunity. Most would have continued their routine, maintaining the invisible boundaries that separated roles and expectations. But Marcus Thompson was not most people. The range was momentarily empty. Sophisticated, electronic targets hung silently, waiting. Precision rifles sat in their racks, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lighting. The sophisticated tracking systems hummed with potential energy, like predators waiting to be unleashed. Marcus's hand moved almost unconsciously. Years of muscle memory, decades of training that ran deeper than any official record could capture, took over. His movements were liquid smooth, deliberate, without hesitation. Where other marksmen would take seconds to assess, to calculate, to prepare, Marcus existed in a different realm of perception. His body remembered what his mind had long tried to forget. The rifle felt like an extension of himself, not a tool, but a part of his very being. Wind conditions, calculated in a millisecond. Distance, instantaneously processed. Environmental variables, integrated faster than any computer could compute. The first shot rang out, not loud, not dramatic, just pure mathematical precision. 1,000-yard target, moving silhouette, partial obscuration. Conditions that would make most elite marksmen hesitate. The digital scoreboard erupted with a series of impossible hits. Perfect shots that defied conventional understanding of human capability. Moving targets disappeared with surgical precision. Wind-adjusted shots found their mark with a consistency that bordered on the supernatural. Each trigger pull was a story, each bullet a testament to skills honed in the most challenging environments imaginable. Rodriguez, who had been collecting spent casings, froze. His mouth opened, then closed. Words failed him. Commander Jack Reynolds was in the adjacent room, reviewing performance metrics from the morning's training. The sudden series of shots caught his attention, not just their frequency, but their impossible precision. He walked toward the range, his massive frame moving with the controlled energy of a predator, sensing something extraordinary. Marcus continued, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware of the growing audience. His body remembered missions from decades past, operations so classified that their very existence was a whisper, a ghost story told only in the most secure intelligence briefings. There were moments, brief, fleeting moments, when Marcus's movements transcended mere skill. This was muscle, memory from scenarios that would never be written in any official document. Missions where failure meant more than just a compromised operation. Missions where failure meant the difference between global stability and absolute chaos. Each shot told a story, not just of technical proficiency, but of survival, of choices made in split seconds that determined the fate of nations. The digital tracking system struggled to process what was happening. Algorithms designed to measure elite marksmanship found themselves recalibrating, struggling to understand the data being input. Perfect shots, consecutive perfect shots. Beyond statistical probability. Rodriguez dropped a metal tray. The clang echoed through the range like a gunshot. Marcus didn't break concentration, didn't even acknowledge the sound. Commander Reynolds stepped into the range, his imposing figure filling the doorway. The boastful demeanor from earlier, the confidence that had filled the break room, began to crack. His laugh, the one that had earlier proclaimed, "Only SEALs shoot that clean," died in his throat. The scoreboard told a story more eloquent than any human could articulate. Hits that defied explanation, precision that went beyond training, skill that existed in a realm beyond military classification. Marcus finished his demonstration, not with drama, not with celebration, just a simple, clean cessation of movement. The rifle returned to its rack, as if it had never been touched. He resumed cleaning, his movements once again those of a simple maintenance worker. But everything had changed. Rodriguez found his voice first. Who ... how? The questions tumbled out, fragmented, unable to capture the magnitude of what he had just witnessed. Commander Reynolds stood silent. The carefully constructed narrative of cell superiority crumbled in those few moments. Everything he thought he understood about marksmanship, about skill, about human potential, it all shifted. Marcus continued cleaning, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The range hummed with an electric tension. The sophisticated equipment, designed to measure the most elite marksmen in the world, seemed to vibrate with the aftermath of what had just occurred. A janitor had just outshot the Navy SEALs, not by a small margin, not by a lucky shot, but with a precision that suggested something far deeper, far more complex. The day was young, and Marcus Thompson was just getting started. The Naval Special Warfare Command Center became a hive of controlled chaos. What had begun as a routine training day had transformed into something far more complex, a mystery that threatened to unravel everything they thought they understood. About operational excellence, Colonel Elizabeth Hartman arrived within hours of the incident. A veteran intelligence officer with 3 decades of experience, she was the kind of military strategist who could dissect a problem with surgical precision. Her reputation preceded her, a woman who had built her career on solving the most intricate puzzles the military could produce. "I want everything," she commanded to her team of investigators. "And I mean everything. Every scrap of paper, every digital record, every possible connection to Marcus Thompson." The initial investigation revealed nothing and everything. Marcus Thompson's personnel file was a masterpiece of redaction. More black lines than actual text. Where most military records told a story, his told a deliberate silence. Standard background checks returned minimal information. Social security number, a driver's license, basic employment records. But nothing that explained the extraordinary skills witnessed on the shooting range. Rodriguez, still shell-shocked from the morning's events, became an unexpected key witness. His detailed account of Marcus's shooting demonstration became the first substantive piece of evidence. He described movements so precise, so calculated, that they seemed to defy human limitation. It was like Rodriguez struggled to find the words, like he wasn't even trying. Like shooting was as natural to him as breathing. Computer forensics teams began their deep dive. The shooting range's advanced tracking systems provided a treasure trove of data. Each bullet's trajectory, wind resistance, target acquisition meticulously recorded and analyzed. Dr. Michael Chun, the lead forensic analyst, found himself increasingly perplexed. "These shot patterns," he told Colonel Hartman, spreading digital readouts across multiple screens. "They're beyond statistical anomaly. This isn't just skill. This is something else entirely." The investigation expanded. Classified databases were accessed. Connections were sought. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. An encrypted communication buried deep in a long-forgotten intelligence archive. A mission log from a classified operation nearly 2 decades earlier. The details were sparse, but they painted a picture of a special operations unit that existed more in whispers than in official documentation. "Ghost Unit Alpha," Colonel Hartman muttered, reading the fragmented report. "Supposedly disbanded. In 2003. Officially, they never existed." Commander Jack Reynolds found himself at the center of an internal investigation. His earlier boasts, his proclamations of SEAL superiority, now seemed painfully naive. He was interviewed repeatedly, each session peeling back layers of military ego and institutional pride. "How did we not know?" was the question that hung in every room, every conversation. Marcus continued his work, cleaning, moving, invisible yet more visible than ever before. Military intelligence is a delicate ecosystem. Information is currency, and Marcus Thompson had just become the most valuable and dangerous commodity imaginable. Digital breadcrumbs began to emerge. A mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains. A tactical operation so classified that its very existence was a state secret. Fragments of after-action reports that hinted at capabilities beyond conventional understanding. Dr. Chun discovered something extraordinary in the shooting range data. "It's not just about accuracy," he explained to Colonel Hartman. "It's about predictive calculation. These shot patterns suggest a level of environmental integration that goes beyond human perception." Psychological profiles were assembled. Interviews conducted. Each avenue of investigation revealed more questions than answers. Marcus Thompson had become a cipher, a living question mark, in the midst of one of the most sophisticated military training facilities in the world. The investigation touched multiple branches of military intelligence. Special Operations Command, CIA, NSA. Each department found itself dancing around a central mystery. Who was Marcus Thompson? And how had he remained undetected for so long? Rodriguez became an unexpected focal point. His eyewitness account, combined with the digital evidence, provided the first concrete narrative of what had occurred. "He wasn't showing off," Rodriguez explained in his statement. "It was like breathing, like the rifle was just an extension of himself." Colonel Hartman understood something deeper was at play. This wasn't just about a skilled shooter. This was about a system, an entire operational approach that had existed in the shadows. As days passed, the investigation took on a life of its own. What had begun as a simple inquiry transformed into a full-scale intelligence operation. Marcus continued cleaning, watching, waiting. The military had discovered something profound. True expertise cannot be contained. True skill cannot be hidden. Forever. And Marcus Thompson was about to become much more than just a janitor. The stage was set. The players were in position. And the real story was just beginning to unfold. The small, nondescript safe house in the California mountains held more secrets than most military compounds. Secured behind layers of electronic and physical protection, it was a sanctuary of memories, a place where the most classified stories of modern warfare found their quiet refuge. Colonel Elizabeth Hartman sat across from a man who should not exist. Marcus Thompson looked different, here not the janitor, not the ghost of the training facility, but something more elemental. A warrior stripped of all pretense. "Tell me about Ghost Unit Alpha," Hartman began, her voice a carefully modulated instrument of investigation. Marcus's eyes, steel gray and infinitely deep, seemed to look through her, beyond her, into memories at most would consider impossible. A story began in the most unexpected of places. Not on a battlefield, not in a training facility, but in a small university research program that was anything but ordinary. In the late 1990s, a classified military initiative sought to understand the absolute limits of human potential. Not just physical capability, but the intricate dance between mind, body, and environmental perception. Marcus was not their first recruit, but he was their most successful. "We were more than soldiers," he began, his voice a low, controlled instrument. "We were an experiment in human optimization. Psychological conditioning, physiological enhancement, neurological recalibration, terms that sound like science fiction, but were very much our reality." The program had multiple objectives. Create operatives who could adapt to any environment, process information faster than any computer, make decisions in microseconds that would determine global outcomes. Marcus spoke of training that went beyond conventional understanding. Exercises that pushed human perception to its absolute limits. Scenarios that required not just physical skill, but a complete reimagining of human capability. Imagine, he explained, being able to calculate wind resistance, target movement, environmental variables, not through computation, but through a kind of intuitive understanding that becomes as natural as breathing. The Ghost Unit was more than a military program. It was a philosophical exploration of human potential. Recruits were not selected for physical prowess alone, but for a complex matrix of psychological, neurological, and physiological markers. Marcus had been a mathematics doctoral candidate when they first approached him. Brilliant, unconventional, someone who saw patterns where others saw chaos. The training was brutal, not just physically, but psychologically. Exercises that would break most individuals became stepping stones to a new understanding of human capability. "We weren't just learning to be better soldiers," Marcus continued. "We were learning to be something else entirely. A bridge between human limitation and human potential." Missions became less about traditional military objectives and more about global strategic interventions, preventing conflicts before they could begin, influencing geopolitical dynamics through precision and understanding that went beyond traditional intelligence gathering. Colonel Hartman listened. Her years of intelligence experience told her this was more than just a story. This was a fundamental reimagining of military operational capability. "Why did you leave?" she asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Marcus's response was not what she expected. A mission. deep in the Hindu Kush Mountains. An operation so classified that its very existence was a state secret. A moment that transformed everything he understood about his role, about the nature of their work. "We discovered," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper, "that the line between protection and manipulation is far thinner than anyone wants to admit. A team lost, not to enemy fire, not to traditional combat scenarios, but to an ethical complexity that challenged everything they had been trained to believe. The Ghost Unit was disbanded not through official channels, but through a collective decision, a recognition that their capabilities had become too powerful, too nuanced to be controlled by traditional military structures. We didn't quit," Marcus explained. "We evolved. We understood that true protection sometimes means stepping back, becoming invisible." Colonel Hartman realized she was witnessing more than an interview. This was a deconstruction of modern military philosophy, a reimagining of what it meant to serve. Marcus's decision to become a janitor was not a fall from grace. It was a strategic choice, a way to remain connected, to observe, to understand, without being part of the system that had created him. "Every institution has blind spots," he said. "Sometimes the best way to understand a system is to exist just outside its perception." The safe house seemed to breathe with the weight of untold stories, classified documents, mission logs, fragments of a history that would never be fully understood. As the conversation drew to a close, Colonel Hartman understood something profound. Marcus Thompson was not just a skilled operative. He was a living testament to the complexity of human potential. "What happens now?" she asked. Marcus's smile was enigmatic. Now, we continue. Some stories are best left in the shadows." The investigation had uncovered something far more significant than a skilled shooter. It had revealed an entire philosophy of human capability that challenged everything the military thought it understood. Marcus Thompson was more than a janitor, more than a former operative. He was a bridge between what was and what could be, and his story was far from over. The Military Leadership Conference Room was a temple of institutional power. Mahogany tables, walls adorned with commemorative plaques, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a backdrop that seemed to frame the momentous conversation about to unfold. Commander Jack Reynolds sat transformed. The bravado that had once defined him had been stripped away, replaced by a humility that came from truly understanding the depth of human potential. Across from him sat a collection of the most senior military leaders in the United States. Admiral Thomas Garrett, a four-star commander with a reputation for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense. General Helena Rodriguez, head of Special Operations. And Colonel Elizabeth Hartman, the primary investigator who had unraveled the mystery of Marcus Thompson. "We're not here to rewrite military doctrine," Admiral Garrett began, his voice a controlled instrument of authority. "We're here to understand what we've discovered." The room was filled with the weight of unspoken implications. Marcus Thompson was more than just a skilled operative. He represented a fundamental challenge to everything they thought they understood about human capability, about military training, about the very nature of expertise. Rodriguez leaned forward, her military bearing unable to hide a sense of genuine curiosity. "The data is unprecedented. His cognitive processing, his environmental integration, his ability to calculate multiple variables simultaneously. It's beyond anything in our current understanding." The presentation began. Forensic analysis of Marcus's performance. Psychological profiles. Fragments of his history with the Ghost Unit. Each slide was a revelation. Each piece of evidence more extraordinary than the last. Jack Reynolds found himself in an unexpected position. The man who had once proclaimed the absolute superiority of Navy SEALs was now the primary advocate for understanding Marcus's unique capabilities. "It's not about who's the best," Reynolds explained. his voice stripped of its earlier bravado. It's about understanding what's possible. Marcus showed us that our current models of training, of human potential, are fundamentally limited. Admiral Garrett's response was measured. We're not looking to create an army of Marcus Thompsons. We're looking to understand the principles that created him. The conversation delved deep. The Ghost Unit wasn't just a military program. It had been a philosophical exploration of human potential. A recognition that true operational excellence went beyond physical training, beyond traditional intelligence gathering. Colonel Hartman presented the most intriguing findings. Marcus's abilities weren't just about marksmanship. They represented a holistic approach to human optimization, psychological conditioning, neurological recalibration, an almost supernatural ability to integrate environmental variables. He's not a weapon, Hartman emphasized. He's a living example of what happens when we view human potential as something more than just physical capability. The implications were profound. Military training had always focused on breaking down and rebuilding. The Ghost Unit had taken a different approach, understanding individual potential, working with innate capabilities, creating operators who are more than just soldiers. Rodriguez pulled up a series of psychological assessments. Look at his baseline cognitive processing. Most training programs try to create uniformity. The Ghost Unit identified and amplified individual potential. Jack Reynolds shared his personal experience. The moment on the shooting range wasn't just a demonstration of skill. It was a philosophical statement about human capability. When I said only SEALs shoot that clean, I was speaking from a place of institutional ego, he admitted. Marcus showed us that true excellence transcends institutional boundaries. The conversation shifted. This wasn't just about Marcus Thompson. This was about reimagining human potential. Admiral Garrett asked the critical question, what do we do with this information? The answers were complex. They couldn't replicate Marcus, but they could learn from the principles that created him. A new approach to training, a recognition that human potential was far more nuanced than traditional military models suggested. We don't weaponize this, Colonel Hartman argued. We understand it. We learn from it. Marcus, who had been silently present throughout the presentation, spoke for the first time. Excellence is not about creating perfect soldiers, he said, his voice calm and measured. It's about understanding individual potential, about recognizing that every person has capabilities far beyond what they understand. The room fell silent. Jack Reynolds looked at Marcus, not as a threat, not as a competitor, but as a fellow warrior who had shown him a fundamental truth about human capability. I owe you an apology, Reynolds said, his voice stripped of all pretense. I understood what it meant to be the best. You showed me that true excellence is something entirely different. Marcus's response was characteristic. A slight nod. A moment of understanding that transcended words. The military leadership had come face to face with a fundamental truth. True excellence cannot be contained. True skill cannot be institutionalized. It exists in the spaces between training and understanding, in the profound depths of human potential. As the meeting concluded, something had changed, not just in the room, but in the fundamental approach to understanding human capability. Marcus Thompson had done more than demonstrate extraordinary skill. He had redefined what it meant to be excellent, and his journey was far from over. Years passed. The world continued its relentless spin, oblivious to the profound transformation that had occurred within the military's most elite circles. Marcus Thompson remained exactly where he had always been, everywhere and nowhere. The janitor's uniform, once a disguise, had become something more. A statement, a choice, a philosophy of existence that transcended institutional boundaries. The Naval Special Warfare Training Center had changed, subtly at first, then more dramatically. The training programs evolved, influenced by the insights gained from Marcus's extraordinary demonstration. Not through wholesale revolution, but through a nuanced understanding of individual potential. Rodriguez, now a senior training commander, had implemented a revolutionary approach. No longer was training about breaking individuals down to rebuild them in a uniform mold. Now, it was about understanding individual capabilities, about recognizing the unique potential within each operator. Commander Jack Reynolds had transformed as well. A boastful SEAL who once proclaimed institutional superiority now lectured at advanced training programs, sharing a message of humility and individual excellence. True skill, he would tell young recruits, is not about who you are supposed to be. It's about understanding who you can become. Marcus watched these changes from a distance, not with pride, not with satisfaction, but with a calm understanding that true change happens in the margins, in the spaces between intention and action. On a crisp California morning, 15 years after the day that had changed everything, Marcus received a visitor. Colonel Elizabeth Hartman, now retired but still sharp as ever, arrived at the training facility. Her walk was slower, but her eyes remained the same piercing, intelligent, always observing. They sat in the same break room where Marcus had once cleaned around boastful SEALs. The symmetry was not lost on either of them. "You changed everything," Hartman said, her voice a mixture of statement and question. Marcus's smile was slight, almost imperceptible. "I didn't change anything," he responded. "I simply showed what was already possible." Their conversation was a dance of unspoken understanding. Two individuals who had seen the world from perspectives most could never comprehend. Hartman shared stories of the changes that had rippled through military training. Psychological assessment programs that now looked for individual potential rather than conformity. Training modules that emphasized adaptability over rigid performance metrics. The Ghost unit was ahead of its time, she said. But now, the entire approach to special operations has been reimagined. Marcus knew the deeper truth. It wasn't about the military changing. It was about understanding human potential in its most fundamental form. A group of young recruits passed by the break room. Their movements were different, more fluid, more individualistic. They carried themselves with a confidence that spoke of understanding, not just training. Rodriguez had implemented what Marcus and the Ghost unit had understood decades earlier. That true excellence comes from recognizing individual potential, not suppressing it. "What happens now?" Hartman asked, echoing a question she had asked years earlier in that mountain safe house. Marcus's response remained unchanged. "We continue. Some stories are best left in the shadows." But something had shifted. The shadows were no longer about hiding. They were about understanding. About recognizing that true potential exists in the spaces between what is seen and unseen. The day progressed. Marcus returned to his cleaning. The same methodical movements, the same precise approach. But everything was different. Commander Reynolds visited the facility that afternoon, not as a conquering hero, not as an institutional representative, but as someone who had learned a fundamental truth about human capability. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. A nod, a moment of understanding, a recognition of a journey that had transformed not just individuals, but entire institutional approaches to human potential. As the sun set over the Pacific, casting long shadows across the Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Marcus Thompson continued his work, cleaning, observing, understanding. The janitor, who had once shattered every conception of military excellence, remained exactly what he had always been. A bridge between what was possible and what could be imagined. His legacy was not in medals, not in official recognition, but in the subtle changes that had transformed an entire approach to human potential. Some warriors are defined by their battles, Marcus Thompson was defined by his understanding that true excellence is not about being the best. It's about becoming something more than anyone could have imagined. The day ended. Another would begin. And Marcus Thompson would continue. Watching, learning, existing in the profound spaces between what is seen and what remains unseen.